across the vast plains of the Chao Phraya River. The dawn of April 1351 broke with a sky painted in crimson fire. Mist veiled the endless rice fields, while the river shimmered like a mirror of the heavens, reflecting the first golden rays of the sun. Upon this land of abundance, a determined prince, Ayutthaya, rode a white elephant along a dusty road. His gaze was fierce, unwavering, as if he already foresaw the destiny of a great empire rising from the soil beneath his feet. Villagers from every corner, farmers, merchants, monks flocked to witness a moment that would echo through centuries, the founding of a new kingdom. War drums thundered, bronze horns blared, and temple bells rang in unison, their voices reaching toward the sky as if to declare the birth of an era. The old whispered of omens, a white elephant found in the forest, herons circling above the city signs, they said, of divine mandate. Standing before thousands, dressed in golden robes embroidered with dragons, Ayutthaya lifted his voice, strong and resolute. I, Ramathabodhi, proclaim the birth of Ayutthaya, a kingdom of gods and men. Here, the Dharma shall guide us. Here, the people shall know peace. And here, the strength of our culture shall shine across the four directions. His words crashed upon the crowd like a tide. Tears welled in the eyes of peasants and nobles alike. Families clutched their children close, believing the promise of a safer tomorrow had just been spoken into existence. From the steps of newly built temples, monks scattered lotus petals and chanted sacred verses, their voices rising like waves, while the multitude roared in thunderous unison, shaking the earth. Yet behind the brilliance of the ceremony lurked storm clouds. Ayutthaya was founded on fertile ground that others coveted. The Khmer in the east with mighty Angkor, the kingdom of Lan, Na, pressing from the north, and to the west, Burma awakening like a restless tiger. Ayutthaya understood with chilling clarity that a throne was not secured by prayers and oaths alone, but by the steel of swords and the blood of soldiers. That night, when the celebrations waned and the people drowned in song and rice wine, King Ayutthaya stood alone upon the balcony of his wooden palace. He gazed at the Chao Phraya, its silver currents gleaming in the moonlight like a dragon winding endlessly into the horizon. His face, half-shadowed, bore the solitude of a man burdened with the weight of destiny. He knew Ayutthaya had been born, but its survival would demand sacrifice, vigilance, and unyielding will. The night wind howled across the land, carrying with it an unspoken warning. Glory would come. Yes, but so too would blood and fire. Thus, Ayutthaya was born through faith, through ambition, and already, in the shadow of the wars yet to come. Ayutthaya, once a fledgling city upon the river's edge, grew with the speed of a rising tide. Within a few decades, its wooden palisades gave way to towering stone walls, gilded temples, and grand palaces that glittered beneath the tropical sun. The kingdom thrived like a lotus in full bloom, rooted in the fertile soil of the Chao Phraya basin. Foreign ships, their sails filled by the monsoon winds, streamed toward Ayutthaya's harbors. Junks from China carried porcelain and silk. Merchants from India brought spices and precious gems. Arab traders arrived with carpets and glass, and even the Portuguese, fresh from their conquest of Malacca, sought to barter firearms and strange new fruits. The river became a living artery of the world, pulsing with commerce and culture. In the heart of the capital, life flourished with a vibrancy few had ever seen. Golden chedis pierced the sky, their reflections shimmering in canals that crisscrossed the city like veins of silver. Monks in saffron robes walked barefoot along shaded streets, chanting prayers as children ran past them laughing. Courtiers, clad in silk dyed crimson and gold, passed through palace gates to attend to their king. But it was not only wealth that marked this age, it was spirit. The arts blossomed. Dancers with delicate hands moved like swaying lotus petals, while poets composed verses of longing and valor. Historians recorded the glory of their kings. Sculptors carved serene Buddhas, and architects raised temples that still endure as monuments of faith. To the people, Ayutthaya was not just a city, it was a symbol, the beating heart of Siam, the Venice of the East. Yet beneath the splendor lay whispers of unease. Prosperity attracted envy, and Ayutthaya's neighbors watched its rise with wary eyes. From the north, Lan Na worried of its swelling might. From the east, the Khmer, though fading, still remembered the days when Angkor ruled supreme. And from the west, Burma fears, restless prepared its claws. King Ramathabodhi's successors knew this truth well. A kingdom that shines too brightly inevitably casts a long shadow. Thus, while Ayutthaya basked in its golden light, the forge of war continued to burn. Soldiers trained in the courtyards, elephants were armored with iron plates, and cannons were lined upon the walls. The people prayed for peace, but the kings prepared for storms. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of scarlet and gold, a court astrologer spoke to the king in hushed tones. "Majesty, Ayutthaya has risen high, but the higher the flame, the stronger the wind that seeks to extinguish it. From the west, danger marches, the tiger of Burma stirs." The king gazed silently at the glowing skyline of his capital, its spires piercing the heavens. His heart swelled with pride and with dread. He knew that Ayutthaya's glory was unmatched, but glory alone would not shield it from the fire to come. The golden age had dawned, magnificent and resplendent, but on the horizon, storm clouds thickened, and thunder murmured from across the mountains. While Ayutthaya basked in its wealth and radiance, beyond the Tenassery Mountains, another power was stirring. In the west, Burma united under ambitious kings grew, restless, hungry, and unyielding. Its warriors, hardened by years of conflict, marched beneath banners emblazoned with tigers and lions. To them, Ayutthaya was not just a neighbor. It was a prize, a jewel glittering too brightly to ignore. The rise of King Tabinshwethi marked the beginning of Ayutthaya's gravest challenge. From his throne in Pegu, he cast his eyes eastward. "Ayutthaya," he declared to his generals, "is a kingdom fat with gold and rice, swollen with pride. We shall claim it as our own, and the glory of Burma will eclipse the world." His words ignited the hearts of his commanders, among them a young, fiery warrior destined to become legendary. On Ayutthaya, though prosperous, was not blind. The spies who slipped through jungle paths returned with grim tidings. Burmese armies massing, war elephants trained, cannons acquired through Portuguese traders. In the royal palace, the air grew heavy with unease. The king of Ayutthaya summoned his generals to the hall of audience. Torches flickered against golden walls as the court fell into tense silence. "The tiger moves," he said gravely, "and its claws reach for our throat. We must be ready." The generals bowed, but in their hearts they knew Burma's fury was unlike any they had faced before. Soon, the first storms broke. Burmese forces crossed the mountain passes like a black tide, drums echoing through the valleys, their war elephants shaking the earth with every step. Villages burned in their wake. Terrified peasants fled toward Ayutthaya's fortified walls. Yet the city stood proud. Its spires gleamed defiantly against the darkening sky. Soldiers lined the battlements, arrows poised, while cannons roared thunder from the walls. Women carried water, monks prayed, and children clung to their mothers as the city braced for siege. Among the crowd of defenders was a boy Prince Naresuan, still young, his eyes burning with the fire of destiny. He watched the flames of battle rise beyond the horizon, unaware that one day he would stand at the center of history, wielding the fate of Siam in his hands. The clash of two powers had begun. Burma sought to devour, Ayutthaya vowed to endure, and between them, the plains of Southeast Asia would become a battlefield drenched in blood and legend. The threat from the west was no longer a whisper, it was war knocking at the gates. The year was 1548. Ayutthaya, radiant yet vulnerable, stood on the edge of catastrophe. From the west, the armies of Burma once more descended upon Siam like a storm, their war drums thundering across the mountains, their elephants armored in steel, tusks sharpened for war. Bayanon, now a fierce and seasoned commander, marched alongside his king, thirsting for conquest. Ayutthaya's walls trembled under siege, fires scorched the outskirts, terrified villagers crowded into the capital, clutching what little they could carry. The city's golden spires glowed defiantly against the smoke-darkened skies, but inside, tension and fear hung like a blade over every heart. In the royal palace, King Mahachakraphat prepared to ride into battle, but before he could mount his elephant, a figure emerged: Queen Suriyothai, his consort, his partner, his equal, draped not in silks but in armor. Her eyes burned with unshakable resolve. "My king," she said firmly, "if you ride to war, then so shall I. The people must see their queen beside them. The enemy must know that Ayutthaya's spirit will never bow." Though the king protested, her decision was final. She mounted a towering war elephant, her figure commanding, her spirit unyielding. Word spread like fire through the ranks. The queen herself was riding into battle. The soldiers roared with renewed courage, their fear eclipsed by awe. On the field, chaos reigned. Burmese and Siamese elephants collided, like mountains in motion, their tusks clashing, their riders hacking at one another with spears and swords. Drums beat furiously, arrows blotted out the sun. The earth shook with every charge. In the heart of the melee, King Chakraphot found himself in peril. A Burmese prince, charging atop his war elephant, aimed directly for the king. The moment hung heavy, as if fate itself drew breath. But then, like lightning through a storm, Queen Suriyothai urged her elephant forward, placing herself between her husband and death. With a cry that pierced the din of battle, she raised her weapon, meeting the enemy head. The clash was brutal. Spears struck, tusks rammed, and in a heartbeat of tragedy, the queen was pierced. Her blood stained the howdah, her cry echoing above the battlefield. Yet in her fall, she bought her king his life. The Siamese soldiers, witnessing their queen's sacrifice, surged with fury. They fought not just for survival, but for honor, for love, for the memory of the woman who had given everything to protect them. Though the battle did not end in decisive victory, her death became immortal, etched into the soul of Ayutthaya, as a symbol of devotion and unyielding courage. As the sun set over the battlefield, the cries of mourning mingled with the smoke. King Chakraphot, holding the lifeless body of his queen, wept not as a ruler, but as a man. And the people of Siam would forever remember her not only as a queen, but as a mother of the nation. Queen Suriyothai's sacrifice became legend of flame that would never be extinguished, a reminder that the heart of Ayutthaya beat strongest not in palaces, but in the courage of its people. The sacrifice of Queen Suriyothai left a scar upon Ayutthaya's soul. Her blood watered the soil, and from it grew a fire that would one day blaze through the heart of Siam. That fire was Prince Naresuan, born in 1555. Naresuan was taken as a child hostage to Burma, a common practice to bind kingdoms through fragile promises of peace. In the courts of his enemies, he learned their language, studied their tactics, and watched their generals plot. But he was no broken captive. Within the heart of the boy burned the memory of his homeland, the temples of Ayutthaya, the sacrifices of his ancestors, and the cry of his queen who had given her life to shield her people. The Burmese sought to mold him, but instead they forged steel. He grew into a warrior prince, disciplined, sharp-edged, and unyielding. When he returned to Ayutthaya, he did not come as a prisoner freed, but as a lion returned to his den, determined to reclaim what was threatened. Ayutthaya itself, battered by endless wars, needed a savior. Fields lay scorched, villages deserted, and walls rebuilt time and again. Yet when Naresuan rode through the gates of the capital, mounted on a towering war elephant, the people gathered in awe. They whispered his name with reverence, as if destiny itself had returned in human form. The young prince wasted no time. He drilled his soldiers tirelessly, blending the discipline of Burmese armies with the spirit of Siamese warriors. He adopted firearms from Portuguese traders, mounted cannons on elephants, and taught his men to fight not only with strength but with cunning. But Naresuan's greatness was not forged only in training grounds. It was in his heart. He carried within him a Furian oath that Ayutthaya would never kneel again. In private, he spoke to his closest companions. "I have seen the pride of Burma, their arrogance, their cruelty. I swear, by the ashes of Queen Suriyothai and the blood of our people, I will meet them not as prey, but as predator. One day, the tiger will bow before Siam." Years passed, and the prince became king. His presence was like thunder before the storm. Where others wavered, he stood resolute. Where others sought peace through compromise, he prepared for war, not for conquest, but for survival. And the time would come when the armies of Burma once again marched eastward, that Naresuan would step onto the battlefield, not as a frightened child of hostage, but as Ayutthaya's shield, its sword, its beating heart. The rise of Prince Naresuan was the rise of Ayutthaya itself, battered yet unbroken, awaiting the day when destiny would be decided upon the clash of elephants and the roar of battle. The year was 1593. The plains of Nong Sarai lay silent beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds. Across the fields stretched army stands of thousands of soldiers, war drums echoing like thunder, the air thick with anticipation. It was not merely a clash of nations. It was destiny itself preparing to speak. On one side, the armies of Burma, led by Crown Prince Naresuan, son of the mighty King Nandabayan, On the other, Ayutthaya, under the command of King Naresuan, once a hostage in Burma, now the Lion of Siam. Between them lay centuries of rivalry, hatred, and blood. The two forces clashed like colliding storms. Elephants charged, tusks shattering against armor. Cannons roared, arrows rained like fire. The ground shook beneath the fury of war. But in the chaos, something extraordinary happened. Amid the smoke and dust, the two princes found themselves face to face atop their elephants, separated from their armies. Their eyes locked across the battlefield, Naresuan with the arrogance of conquest, Naresuan with the unbreakable will of a man defending his homeland. In that moment, Naresuan raised his voice above the din of battle. "Come then, Prince of Burma. Let us end this war, not with the blood of thousands, but with the strength of two men. Face me, if you dare." The challenge thundered across the field, silencing the chaos for a heartbeat. Naresuan, proud and fearless, accepted. What followed was no ordinary combat, it was a duel written into legend. Their elephants charged, colliding with the force of mountains. Spears clashed, blades flashed, the sound of iron on iron ringing through the battlefield. The two princes fought as if the world itself depended on their victory, because it did. Blow after blow, the duel raged. Naresuan's elephant reared, striking hard. Naresuan lunged, nearly piercing his enemy's armor. The soldiers below held their breath, knowing the fate of kingdoms balanced upon this clash of titans. Then, in a moment of clarity and ferocity, Naresuan struck. His halberd arced through the air and found its mark, slicing through Naresuan with devastating finality. The Burmese prince cried out, then fell lifeless, his blood spilling onto the howdah, staining the battlefield forever. A roar erupted from Ayutthaya's soldiers, their spirits ignited by the triumph of their king. The Burmese, stunned by the fall of their prince, faltered. What had begun as an invasion collapsed into retreat. Naresuan, atop his elephant, lifted his bloodied weapon high. His voice carried across the field. "Siam shall never bow. Let all who threaten our land remember this day." The duel on elephant back became more than a victory, it became legend. A story passed from father to son, from mother to child, a flame of defiance that would burn for centuries. That day, the tiger roared, and Burma's claws withdrew. Ayutthaya stood victorious not merely because of swords and elephants, but because of the indomitable spirit of one man who refused to kneel. The dust of battle had barely settled when Ayutthaya began to rise anew. The victory of King Naresuan at Nong Sarai was not just a triumph over Burma, it was a declaration to the world that Siam would endure, proud and unbroken. The kingdom, scarred by decades of war, now entered an era of renewal, like a lotus blooming from the mud. The city of Ayutthaya pulsed with life. Along its wide canals and bustling markets, merchants from distant lands converged. Chinese junks crowded the harbors, bringing silks and porcelain. Indian traders arrived with spices and precious gems. Persian and Arab caravans offered carpets and glassware. Even the Dutch, Portuguese, and Japanese established their own enclaves, trading muskets, clocks, and exotic goods. The city became a living crossroads of civilizations. Golden temples soared skyward, their spires glistening in the tropical sun. Monks in saffron robes carried bowls through lively streets, their chants blending with the calls of vendors and the laughter of children. Palaces shimmered with gilded roofs, while dancers in ornate costumes moved gracefully in royal courts, their hands weaving stories of gods and heroes. To foreign visitors, Ayutthaya was breathtaking, a city of water and light, often called the Venice of the East. Its wealth and splendor rivaled that of any capital in Asia, even drawing comparisons to the grandeur of Ming China or Mughal India. Diplomats recorded their awe. Traders carried tales of its glory back to Europe and beyond. But beneath the radiance, the shadow of vigilance remained. King Naresuan, though victorious, never forgot the price of complacency. He fortified the city walls, trained soldiers relentlessly, and ensured the kingdom remained prepared for any storm. War elephants stood ready, cannons guarded the gates, and soldiers drilled in courtyards. Yet, for a time, peace blessed the land. Farmers returned to their fields, harvests overflowed, and festivals filled the streets with music and fire. Lanterns floated along canals like drifting stars, while families gathered in the glow of temples to give thanks for survival and prosperity. But destiny is rarely still. As Ayutthaya flourished, eyes from afar watched with envy and unease. Rivals whispered in shadows, plotting. waiting for the moment when the jewel of Siam might falter. For now, Ayutthaya basked in its golden light, but beyond the horizon, storms were gathering once again. For nearly a century, Ayutthaya basked in its brilliance. The city thrived as a jewel of Asia, a place where trade, art, and faith intertwined. Yet, as every flame casts a shadow, the glory of Ayutthaya drew envy from the west. That shadow returned. Burma, once shaken by defeat, had risen again under the Konbong dynasty. From their stronghold at Ava, new kings rekindled the ancient ambition to dominate Siam. The name of Naresuan still burned in their memory, a wound never forgotten, a humiliation never forgiven. They vowed that Ayutthaya would one day fall, and Burma would reign supreme. Their armies grew stronger with each campaign. Vast columns of infantry marched in disciplined ranks, muskets gleaming. War elephants, armored with steel and brass, stood like living fortresses. Cannons thundered as they tested their strength along the borderlands. Villages along the frontier trembled under raids, their smoke rising like grim warnings to the capital. In Ayutthaya, the golden spires still glittered, but unease crept into the hearts of the people. Monks spoke of omens, comets streaking across the sky, unseasonal floods, the eerie silence of birds before dawn. Traders whispered of Burmese armies massing beyond the mountains. Inside the royal palace, kings and ministers debated furiously. Some called for diplomacy. We must buy peace with gifts and alliances. Others, hardened by memory, demanded preparation for war. The ghost of Queen Suriyothai, the roar of Naresuan's victory, these memories urged them to resist, to fight, to endure once more. But Ayutthaya was no longer the united fortress it had once been. Years of wealth had bred rivalries among nobles. Corruption gnawed at the court, and the vigilance of old had begun to fade. While dancers still performed in glittering halls and merchants filled the markets with riches, the strength of the kingdom's heart began to falter, and Burma saw the weakness. When the Konbong king struck, he struck with fury. Armies poured through the passes, their banners black against the sky. Villages burned, temples crumbled, and the cries of refugees echoed down the Chao Phraya. Once again, Ayutthaya's walls braced for the storm. The people clinging to hope, praying that the spirit of Naresuan still lingered within their city. The shadow of Burma had returned, and this time, it threatened not just the borders, but the very survival of Ayutthaya itself. The year was 1767, and the golden city of Ayutthaya, called the Venice of the East, stood on the edge of annihilation. For centuries, it had shone with wealth and splendor, a crossroads of nations. But now, the heavens themselves seemed to weep for its fate. The Burmese Konbong dynasty, relentless and merciless, had marched east with a fury unmatched. Their army stands of thousands strong, war elephants clad in armor, cannons roaring like thunder surrounded Ayutthaya in an iron grip. The siege dragged on for months. Inside the walls, despair grew. Food dwindled to scraps. Rice was rationed by the handful. Children cried from hunger while their mothers whispered prayers into the night. The once bustling markets were silent. The canals, once full of boats, now reflected only smoke and ash. Yet the people held on, clinging to hope. Monks chanted within temples, their voices hoarse but steady, as if their prayers alone could keep the city standing. Warriors manned the walls, their bodies weak but their eyes burning with defiance. Families hid sacred statues of the Buddha in the earth, believing that someday Ayutthaya would rise again. But the Burmese were relentless. Day by day, they tightened their grip. Cannons pounded the walls, stones crumbled, fires spread. Then came the final storm. On April 7, 1767, the defenses of Ayutthaya collapsed. Burmese soldiers poured through breaches in the walls like a black flood. Temples blazed, palaces crumbled, and screams filled the air. Golden spires that once gleamed proudly against the sky now melted in fire. The great libraries, filled with chronicles of centuries, turned to ash. Statues of the Buddha were hacked and desecrated, their serene faces broken. In the chaos, men and women fought with bare hands, wielding sticks and stones against armored invaders. Mothers shielded children with their bodies. Monks fell beside their temples. The city that had once hosted the world was devoured in a single inferno of conquest. By nightfall, Ayutthaya was no more. The capital of Siam, the jewel of Southeast Asia, lay in ruins. Smoke rose into the heavens like a funeral pyre, visible for miles. But though the city had fallen, its spirit did not die. Survivors fled into the forests and villages, carrying with them fragments of their culture, their faith, and their will to endure. Among them was a general named Taksin, who would soon gather the scattered people and kindle the flame of Siam once more. Ayutthaya was lost, but its memory would never fade. From its ashes, a new kingdom would rise, and the spirit of Siam would continue to burn. The fall of Ayutthaya in 1767 seemed, at first, like the end of Siam itself. The once great capital was reduced to smoking ruins, its temples desecrated, its libraries ashes upon the wind. To the outside world, it appeared as if the flame of the kingdom had been snuffed out forever. But flames, though buried in ash, can spark anew. Among the survivors who escaped the devastation was a commander named General Taksin. Fierce in spirit and sharp in vision, he refused to let the death of Ayutthaya mark the death of his people. Gathering soldiers, farmers, and refugees, he carved a path through chaos, striking back against Burmese forces with relentless courage. In the jungles and along the riverbanks, the resistance grew. Villagers joined his cause, offering food and shelter. Monks blessed his warriors, proclaiming that he carried the spirit of the fallen capital. Through victories great and small, Taksin forged hope from despair, uniting the shattered fragments of Siam into a single heartbeat once more. By 1768, he had reclaimed independence, founding a new capital at Thonburi, near the banks of the Chao Phraya. There, amid humble beginnings, a new dynasty took root. Though Ayutthaya's palaces lay in ruins, its soul had not perished. It lived on in the resilience of its people. In time, the center of power shifted again, to Bangkok under the Chakri dynasty, where the grand palace rose in shimmering defiance, echoing the grandeur of Ayutthaya's lost halls. The city's spires and temples stood as symbols of rebirth, carrying forward the cultural, spiritual, and political legacy of their ancestors. Ayutthaya's ruins, however, remained silent, haunting, eternal. Broken Buddha statues gazed calmly across fields of stone. Headless figures stood among crumbling walls, testaments to both destruction and endurance. To this day, they whisper of the glory that once was, and of the sacrifices that allowed a nation to endure. The story of Ayutthaya is not merely one of conquest and collapse. It is a story of resilience, of a people who, though beaten and burned, refused to vanish. It is the story of how courage, sacrifice, and memory can outlast fire and sword. And so, the legacy of Ayutthaya lives on. In every temple bell that rings across Thailand, in every festival lantern that drifts upon the river, in the proud spirit of a nation that rose from ashes to endure, the spirit of Ayutthaya still breathes. The city fell, but the nation survived. The walls crumbled, but the heart endured. And in that endurance lies the true immortality of Ayutthaya.